The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was built to make visitors feel small. Its walls stretched upward for hundreds of meters, covered in golden symbols from 12 ancient civilizations. Floating platforms held delegates from across the known universe. Light came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The architects had designed it this way on purpose. They wanted newcomers to understand their place. Carter stood at the center of it all, alone on a small platform that barely fit her feet. She was 43 years old with short gray hair and tired eyes. Her uniform was simple compared to the flowing robes and glowing armor worn by the alien delegates above her. She looked exactly like what she was, a human ambassador from a young species asking for help. The Council of 12 surrounded her in a half-circle. Each delegate represented one of the elder races, civilizations that had traveled between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. They looked down at her with expressions that ranged from boredom to amusement. High Chancellor sat at the center on a throne made of living crystal. He was a species that resembled tall insects with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the light like broken mirrors. His people had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had seen species rise and fall like waves on a beach. "You may speak human," he said. His voice echoed through the chamber. Took a breath. She had practiced this speech 100 times on the journey here. She had memorized every word, every pause, every gesture. But standing here now, surrounded by beings who saw her people as children, she felt the weight of what she was asking. "The Planet 9 is dying," she began. "The Horde has surrounded it. 12 million civilians are trapped in their last city. They have food for maybe 2 more weeks. After that, they will starve. And when they are too weak to fight back, they will finish what they started." She paused and looked up at the faces watching her. Most showed nothing. A few seemed mildly interested. "The Terran Republic is requesting permission to send military support to 9. We have a carrier group ready to deploy. 3,000 soldiers. We can be there in 40 hours. Silence filled the chamber. Then slowly High Chancellor began to laugh. It was a clicking sound like stones rattling in a metal can. The other delegates joined him. Soon the entire council was laughing at her. Stood still and waited. "Forgive us," said when the laughter died down. "We mean no disrespect. It is simply amusing. The Horde has conquered 100 worlds. They have destroyed fleets that would make your entire navy look like toys, and you wish to send 3,000 soldiers." "Yes," said. "Human soldiers," another delegate added. This was of a species of pale humanoids with no eyes. They saw the world through psychic powers that humans could barely understand. Soft creatures with short lives, no natural weapons, no psionic abilities, no regeneration. You cannot even survive in hard vacuum without machines." "That is correct," said. "Then what exactly do you hope to accomplish?" asked. "They will destroy your soldiers in hours. You will lose ships, equipment, lives, and 9 will still fall. This is not courage, Ambassador. This is stupidity." Felt her hands tighten at her sides, but she kept her voice steady. "With respect, High Chancellor, I am not asking for your opinion. I am asking for permission to transit through coalition space. Our soldiers know the risks. They have volunteered." "Volunteered to die," said. "Volunteered to fight." The chamber fell quiet again. High Chancellor leaned forward on his throne, his compound eyes catching the light. "Let me explain something to you, child," he said. "We have observed your species for some time now. You are clever, you build interesting machines, your persistence in commerce has been noteworthy, but war is not commerce. War is the domain of the elder races. We have fought them before, we know their strength. The Empire lost 4 battle fleets trying to stop them at the nebula. 4 fleets, Ambassador, 60,000 ships." He let that number hang in the air. "We did not lose those ships because we lacked courage. We lost them because they are stronger. Sometimes the wise choice is to accept what cannot be changed. They are a tragic loss, but they are not worth risking more lives." looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked around the chamber at the other delegates, the with their empty eye sockets, the with their armored skin and regenerating limbs, the with their plasma shields and ancient warships. Each of them had decided that 12 million lives were not worth the cost. "I understand," she said slowly. "You have calculated the value of those lives and found it too low. You have measured the risk and decided it is not worth taking. You are old and wise and powerful, and you have made a rational choice." She paused. "But humans do not always make rational choices." Tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I mean that we have been making irrational choices since the beginning. We crossed oceans in wooden boats that should have sunk. We went to our moon in machines held together by hope and mathematics. We survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that killed millions of our own kind. Every generation told the next one that some things could not be done, and every generation did them anyway." She took a step forward on her tiny platform. "You call us young, you call us soft, you call us biologically unremarkable, and you are right. We have no claws, no armor, no psychic powers, but we have something else. We have 10,000 years of practice at doing impossible things. We have ancestors who walked into fire because someone on the other side needed help. We have a very long memory, High Chancellor, and we remember what happens when good people do nothing." Stared at her. The laughter was gone from the chamber now. "You will die," he said quietly. "Your soldiers will die for nothing." "Maybe," said, "but at least we will die trying. And when the history of this war is written, let it show who fought and who stood aside." She turned and walked off the platform without waiting for permission. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Behind her, the Council of 12 watched her go. 3 hours later, sat alone in her quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel. She had sent the message to command already. 4 words that would change everything. She stared out the window at the stars and thought about the soldiers who would answer her call. They were not young. They were not powerful. They were just people who had spent their lives learning that some things mattered more than survival. The 71st was coming, and the galaxy would learn what humans were made of. The carrier vessel Endurance was old. Her hull was from battles fought before most of her current crew was born. Her engines made sounds they should not make. Her corridors smelled like oil and sweat, and the particular kind of hope that comes from having nothing left to lose. General Cole stood in the main hangar bay and looked at his soldiers. They sat on crates and leaned against walls and cleaned weapons that had been cleaned 100 times already. There were 3,000 of them, and their average age was 47 years old. The coalition press had given them a nickname, the Gray Wolves. Cole did not like it, but he understood why it stuck. Looking at his people now, he saw more gray hair than brown. He saw wrinkles and scars and the slow movements of bodies that had been through too much. He saw men and women who should have been home with their families, playing with, tending gardens, living quiet lives. Instead, they were here, volunteers, every one of them. Cole was 64 years old. He had retired 3 years ago after 40 years of service. His wife had died in a shuttle accident 2 months before his retirement, and he had spent those 3 years sitting in an empty house, trying to remember what peace felt like. When the call came for volunteers, he had been the first to answer. He walked through the hangar bay, stopping to talk with his soldiers. He knew most of their names and stories. He had made it his business to know. Sergeant Maya Torres sat on a crate near the far wall, working on her left arm. It was prosthetic, a thing of metal and wire that she had built herself from salvage parts after losing the original on Titan 30 years ago. She was 61 now, her hair completely white, her face lined with the marks of a hard life. But her eyes were sharp, and her hands were steady as she adjusted a stubborn joint. "Giving you trouble?" Cole asked. Maya looked up and smiled. It was the smile of someone who had learned to find humor in bad situations. Always does before a fight. I think it knows. "How are you feeling?" "Old," she said. "Tired, ready." She snapped the joint into place and flexed her metal fingers, same as everyone else. Cole nodded and moved on. Corporal Shaw sat alone near the weapon racks, reading something on a small screen. He was younger than most of them, only 38, but his eyes had the same weight. He had been a school teacher in Montana before his first tour. After his third tour, he had gone back to teaching. He had a daughter named Emma who was 12 years old and the center of his universe. "Letter from home?" Cole asked. Looked up quickly and put the screen away. "Just some pictures. Emma started soccer this year. She is getting pretty good." "You did not have to volunteer, you know. You have a family." Was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is exactly why I volunteered, sir. I want Emma to grow up in a galaxy where people help each other. I want her to know that her father did the right thing, even when it was hard." Cole put a hand on his shoulder but said nothing. There was nothing to say. In the corner of the hangar bay, a group of soldiers gathered around Master Sergeant Aaron Price. He was telling a story, his hands moving through the air as he described some battle from decades past. He was 63 years old, with a face like worn leather and a voice like gravel. His wife had died last spring after a long illness, and he had volunteered the next day. When the recruitment officer asked him why, he had said simply, "I still have one good fight left in me. Might as well make it count." Cole listened to the end of the story, which involved a broken tank, 3 enemy soldiers, and a well-thrown rock. The soldiers laughed, and for a moment they were not old veterans heading into a hopeless battle. They were just people sharing a moment together. A chime sounded through the ship. Cole made his way to the front of the hangar bay and climbed onto a platform so everyone could see him. The talking stopped. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned toward him. "You all know why we are here," Cole began. His voice was rough but carried easily through the space. 12 million civilians on 9 are going to die if no one helps them. The coalition decided they are not worth saving. We decided differently." He paused and looked across the faces watching him. "They have never lost a siege. They have conquered 100 worlds. They have weapons that can crack planets and soldiers that feel no fear. By every rational measure, we should not be here. We should be home, living out our remaining years in peace." He let that sit for a moment. "But we are not rational people. We are Terrans. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every day for 100,000 years, and we survived anyway. We survived ice and fire and floods and plagues. We survived each other, which was sometimes the hardest part. We learned a long time ago that survival is not just about staying alive. It is about being worthy of life." He pointed toward the front of the ship, toward the direction they were traveling. "Out there, 12 million people are waiting to die. They do not know we are coming. They do not know anyone is coming. They have been abandoned by every species that was supposed to protect them. They are alone." His voice grew harder. "But they are not alone anymore, because we are going to stand between them and the darkness, and we are going to hold that line until there is nothing left of us to hold it with. That is what we do. That is what humans have always done." The hangar bay was completely silent. "Some of you will not come back from this. I will not lie to you about that. They are strong and we are old, and the odds are not in our favor. But I have learned something in my years of service. The odds do not matter when you are fighting for something real. The odds do not matter when you refuse to quit." He looked at Maya Torres with her metal arm, at Shaw with his daughter's pictures, at Aaron Price with his stories and his grief, at 3,000 people who had every reason to stay home and had chosen to come anyway. "They call us the Gray Wolves. They mean it as an insult, but wolves do not stop hunting because they get old. They get smarter. They get meaner. They learn where to bite to make it count. And when you corner a wolf, when you threaten what it loves, it does not back down. It does not surrender. It fights until its last breath." He raised his fist. "Let them see what old wolves can do." The cheer that rose from the hangar bay shook the walls of the ship. It was not the cheer of young soldiers hungry for glory. It was something deeper and quieter and more dangerous. It was the sound of people who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The Endurance jumped into hyperspace an hour later. 9 was 40 hours away. 12 million lives were waiting. And the gray wolves were coming. 9 was burning when they arrived. From orbit, the planet looked like it was covered in orange scars. Cities that had stood for centuries were now just smoke and ash. The fleet hung in the darkness like a swarm of metal insects, thousands of ships surrounding the dying world. The Endurance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Immediately, alarms began screaming. The HAD detected them. General Cole stood on the bridge and watched the enemy ships begin to turn toward them. There were at least 200 warships, each one bigger than the Endurance. They had walked into a trap with their eyes open. "All soldiers to landing craft," Cole said calmly. "We knew they would see us coming. That was always the plan. Get our people to the surface before they can cut us off." The Endurance dove toward the planet, her old engines straining. Fighters screamed past, their weapons tearing into the carrier's hull. Explosions rocked the ship. Metal screamed. But the landing bays opened, and one by one, they fell toward 9. Maya Torres gripped the straps of her seat as her shook and twisted. Through the small window, she could see plasma fire lighting up the sky like lightning. The soldier next to her was praying quietly. The soldier across from her was throwing up. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. His voice was too calm for what was happening outside. Then something hit them. The world turned sideways. Alarms screamed. Maya saw fire and felt the ship spinning. She closed her eyes and thought of her daughter, who had died 15 years ago in a mining accident on Titan. She thought about how much she missed her. They crashed into the surface of 9 with enough force to knock Maya unconscious. When she woke up, the ceiling was the floor and the front of the ship was gone. Bodies lay around her. Some were moving. Most were not. She pulled herself free and crawled out into the air of an alien world. It smelled like smoke and blood and something chemical she could not name. The sky was dark with ash. In the distance, she could see the mountain city of the last refuge of the people. Between her and the city stood an army of. They were tall, nearly 3 meters, with black armor that seemed to absorb light. Their faces were hidden behind helmets with red visors. They moved like machines, precise and deadly, carrying weapons that glowed with unstable energy. Maya checked her rifle. It still worked. She checked her prosthetic arm. It still worked. She looked around and found 11 other survivors from her, all of them armed and ready. "Looks like we walk from here," she said. The battle that followed would later be called the 18-hour stand. It was not one fight but 100 small ones, scattered across the burning surface of 9. Groups of Terran soldiers fought their way through enemy territory that seemed to have no end. Maya led her small squad through collapsed tunnels beneath the surface. They had built these passages centuries ago for emergencies. Now they were the only safe route to the city, but they knew about them too. They met the enemy in the darkness. Maya's rifle jammed after the first 3 shots. She threw it aside and pulled out her combat knife. At 61 years old, with a prosthetic arm and bad knees, she killed 9 soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. She moved between them like a ghost, finding the gaps in their armor, striking where they did not expect. When it was over, she stood in a tunnel lit only by the glow of dying. Her knife was broken. Her uniform was soaked with blood, most of it not her own. The soldiers behind her stared at her with something like fear. "What?" she said. "They were in our way." Corporal Shaw never made it to the tunnels. His landed near a refugee camp outside where civilians were trying to reach the city. They had surrounded the camp and were closing in. Saw a child standing alone in the middle of the chaos. She was small, maybe 7 or 8 years old by human standards, with pale blue skin and huge frightened eyes. She was calling for her mother. He did not think, he ran. Plasma fire burned the air around him as he grabbed the child and started moving. The distance to the city was 2 miles. 2 miles of open ground with no cover and enemies everywhere. He ran anyway. His legs burned. His lungs screamed. The child held onto his neck so tight he could barely breathe. Behind him, he could hear the following. They were faster than him. They were closing in. At the edge of the city, a shock trooper caught up to him. It was huge, nearly 4 meters tall, with 4 arms and teeth like knives. It blocked the path to safety. Set the child down behind him. Run, he said. Run and do not look back. The child ran. Faced the monster with nothing but his sidearm and 2 grenades. He fired until his weapon was empty. The did not slow down. It raised its weapon to kill him. So pulled the pins on both grenades and threw himself at the creature. The explosion shook the ground. Soldiers on the city walls saw it and immediately sent a team to investigate. They found the child first, hiding behind a rock, crying for the human who had saved her. They found second, or what was left of him. The shock trooper was dead, had made sure of that. Master Sergeant Aaron Price held the eastern approach with 7 soldiers. They were all that was left of his platoon after the landing. They sent 200 troops to break through their position. Aaron had chosen his ground carefully. The approach was narrow, with high walls on either side. The enemy could only come at them a few at a time. It was the perfect place to make a stand. For 4 hours they held. They fired until their weapons overheated. They threw grenades until they had none left. When the ammunition ran out, they used rocks and broken debris in their bare hands. One by one, Aaron watched his soldiers fall. Private went down first, shot through the chest. Corporal Davis was next, pulled into the enemy ranks and overwhelmed. Sergeant Miller lasted 3 hours before a plasma round took her leg and she bled out in Aaron's arms. But they held. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found Aaron sitting against a wall, surrounded by enemy dead. He had 6 wounds that should have killed him. His rifle was broken. His knife was buried in a skull 3 meters away. He was holding his wife's photograph in his bloody hands. "You made it," the rescue team leader said. Aaron looked up. His eyes were tired but clear. "Got a cigarette?" he asked, and directions to the next fight. The sun rose over 9 on the first morning. The advance had stalled. Not stopped, but stalled. 3,000 old soldiers had done what the Council of 12 said was impossible. They had made the enemy bleed. By the second day, the galaxy was watching. Someone had leaked footage from the battle. Maybe it was a journalist drone that survived the landing. Maybe it was a who had managed to send transmissions through the blockade. No one knew for certain. But suddenly, everyone was seeing what was happening on 9. The videos spread across 1,000 worlds in hours. They showed old men and women fighting with everything they had. They showed soldiers refusing to stay down after being shot. They showed a 61-year-old woman killing enemy troops with a broken knife. They showed a father giving his life to save a child he had never met. The coalition news networks did not know what to say at first. This was not how wars were supposed to go. They were supposed to win. Everyone knew that. The elder races had calculated it and accepted it and moved on. But these humans had not received the calculation, or maybe they had received it and thrown it away. Citizens gathered in public squares to watch the feeds. They saw General Cole standing in a ruined command center, his uniform torn and bloody, giving orders as plasma fire exploded around him. They saw his soldiers following those orders without hesitation. They saw people dying and others taking their place without being asked. High Chancellor watched from his palace, alone in his private chambers. He did not speak. He did not move. He just watched. Cole had been wounded in the first hour of the battle. A piece of shrapnel had torn through his side and lodged somewhere near his spine. The medics told him he needed surgery immediately or he would die. He told them to save their supplies for soldiers who could still fight. By the second day, he could barely stand, but he refused to leave the command center. His soldiers needed to see him. They needed to know that their general was still with them. When the commanders demanded his surrender, he broadcast his response on an open channel. He knew the whole galaxy would hear it. That was the point. "You think you have seen war," he said. His voice was weak but clear. "We were killing each other before your ancestors crawled out of the swamp. We fought with rocks and sticks in our bare hands. We invented 100 ways to destroy ourselves, and then we invented 100 more. We wrote poems about war. We painted pictures of it. We made it into songs." He paused and coughed. Blood stained his teeth. "You have conquered 100 worlds because those worlds had never met anything like you. But we have met things like you before. We have met them on every continent of our planet in every century of our history. Tyrants, monsters, forces that thought they could not be stopped." His eyes were burning. "We stopped them all. Some of them took years, some took generations, some we are still fighting, but we have never, not once in our entire history, surrendered to the darkness. We do not know how, it is not in our nature." He lifted his head and looked directly into the camera, speaking now to everyone watching across the galaxy. "You want 9? Come take it from us, but understand what that means. We will not stop. We will not break. You will have to kill every single one of us, and even then more will come, because we are humans, and we do not leave our people behind." The broadcast ended. The galaxy was silent. Then slowly, things began to change. On a mining colony at the edge of Coalition space, a freighter captain watched Cole's speech and immediately changed course for 9. He had no weapons. His ship was old and slow, but he had cargo space and fuel, and he knew there would be refugees who needed evacuation. On a station, a retired military officer gathered a group of volunteers. They were civilians with no training, but they had personal vessels and they knew how to fly. They left that night, heading for a planet where 12 million lives hung in the balance. Across a dozen species and 100 worlds, people who had accepted the victory as inevitable suddenly began to question it. If humans could fight, why could they not fight too? If old soldiers could stand against impossible odds, what was stopping everyone else? The Coalition emergency channels filled with traffic. Ships were reporting for 9. Small ships, civilian vessels, cargo haulers, even private yachts. They came from everywhere. They had no coordination, no strategy, no orders. They simply came. A trading vessel arrived with medical supplies. A freighter brought ammunition. A pleasure craft, owned by a wealthy merchant who had never held a weapon in his life, landed at and began loading refugees. They tried to stop them. They intercepted a dozen ships in the first hours. They destroyed 5, but more kept coming. The blockade that had seemed so complete began to develop holes. Inside, the people watched in disbelief. They had been abandoned by everyone. They had accepted death as certain. And now, ships from across the galaxy were risking everything to save them. Maya Torres helped coordinate the evacuation of a refugee tunnel that held 3,000 civilians. Her arm had stopped working hours ago, but she refused to rest. A young woman approached her as they worked. "Why?" the woman asked. Her voice was quiet, almost afraid of the answer. "Why did you come here? You did not know us. You had no reason to help." Maya stopped and looked at her. She was exhausted. Every part of her body hurt. She had seen friends die that day and would probably see more die before it was over. "Because someone had to," she said simply, "and we were the ones who said yes." By the end of the second day, 17,000 refugees had been evacuated from 9. It was a small fraction of the total population, but it was 17,000 lives that would have been lost otherwise. The hive mind observed all of this with growing confusion. Their calculations had predicted human defeat within 6 hours. Instead, the battle was now in its 40th hour, and the Terrans were still fighting. Worse, the arrival of civilian vessels was disrupting their control of orbital space. Every ship they destroyed seemed to inspire two more to come. They had never encountered an enemy like this. They had never faced a species that did not respond to fear the way they were supposed to. The humans did not run when their friends died. They did not surrender when they were surrounded. They did not give up when the odds were impossible. Instead, they laughed. They sang old songs from a planet called Earth. They told jokes to each other between firefights. They acted like victory was still possible, even when every piece of evidence said it was not. The hive mind did not understand. It could not understand. And for the first time in 1,000 years of conquest, it began to feel something it had almost forgotten. Doubt on the third day the horde. The hive mind had made its decision during the night. It was not a decision of emotion, because they did not feel emotion the way other species did. It was a calculation, cold and precise, the same kind of calculation that had guided them through 100 conquests. The calculation was simple. They could take 9. They had the numbers and the firepower and the time, but the cost had become unacceptable. Every meter of ground they gained cost them soldiers they could not easily replace. Every hour they fought brought more civilian ships through their blockade. The humans were dying, yes, but they were dying slowly and expensively, and they were taking with them at a rate the hive mind had not predicted. Worse, the longer the battle continued, the more attention it gathered. Species that had stayed silent during 100 other conquests were now speaking up. Coalition delegates who had dismissed the were now demanding action. The humans had turned a forgotten siege into a galactic event. The hive mind calculated the cost of victory and found it too high. Not impossible, but too high. There were easier targets. There were worlds that would fall without this much resistance. 9 was not worth the price the humans were making them pay. At dawn on the third day, the fleet began to pull back. Ground troops retreated to their landing craft. Artillery fell silent. The red visors that had filled the horizon started to disappear. Inside, no one understood what was happening at first. Maya Torres watched the enemy withdraw through a broken window and felt her knees give out. She sat on the floor and stared at nothing for a long time. It did not seem real. After everything they had lost, after all the friends she had watched die, it did not seem possible that they had won. But they had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had won. The celebrations in the city were quiet and strange. People hugged each other and cried. Soldiers who had been fighting for 3 days straight collapsed where they stood. The civilians who had survived came out of their tunnels and looked at the sky as if seeing it for the first time. General Cole did not live to see the withdrawal. He had refused medical evacuation 3 times during the battle. Each time, he said there were soldiers who needed the transport more than him. By the third night, his body had finally given out. The wound in his side had become infected. His organs were shutting down one by one. Carter was with him when he died. She had dropped to the planet's surface on the second day, insisting that she would not ask others to fight if she was not willing to stand with them. She had spent the last 30 hours carrying supplies, helping wounded soldiers, doing whatever she could. Now she sat beside Cole's bed in a makeshift medical tent and held his hand. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. The machines around him beeped slowly, measuring the end of a life. "Did we do it?" he asked without opening his eyes. His voice was barely a whisper. "We did it," said. "They are leaving. The evacuation ships got through. 9 will survive." Cole smiled. It was a small smile, tired and peaceful. "Good, that is good." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Tell them we remembered what we are." "What does that mean?" asked. But Cole did not answer. He had already stopped breathing. Stayed with him for a long time after that. She did not cry. There would be time for tears later. Right now, she needed to be strong for everyone who was still fighting, still working, still hopping. When she finally walked out of the tent, she found Maya Tors waiting for her. The old sergeant looked like she had been dragged through hell. Her prosthetic arm hung useless at her side. Her uniform was more blood than fabric, but she was standing. "He is gone," said. Maya nodded slowly. "I know, I felt it somehow, felt something go out of the world." They stood together in silence, watching the smoke rise from a dozen fires across the ruined landscape. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "Now we go home," said, "and we tell everyone what happened here, what you did, what all of you did." 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council reconvened. The chamber looked the same as before, with its golden walls and floating platforms and ancient symbols. But something had changed. The atmosphere was different. The arrogance that had filled the room was gone. Carter stood at the center again on the same small platform. But this time, no one was laughing. High Chancellor rose from his crystal throne. His compound eyes moved across the chamber, taking in the faces of the other delegates. Then he looked down at the human ambassador and spoke a single sentence that would be recorded in the histories of 1,000 worlds. "Let the record show, the humans are no longer young." The words hung in the air. No one moved, no one spoke. Continued, "They came to 9 when we would not. They fought when we calculated fighting was pointless. They died for people they had never met, from a species not their own. And they did not do this because they were strong or because they had powers we lacked. They did it because it was right." He paused. "We have called ourselves the elder races for 10,000 years. We believed that age made us wise, but wisdom is not measured in centuries. It is measured in choices, and the humans have made a choice that shames us all." The chamber remained silent. From this day forward, the Terran Republic will have a permanent seat on the Council of 12. Their voice will carry equal weight to any elder race. They have earned this not through conquest or commerce, but through sacrifice. They have shown us what it means to be worthy of the stars. Looked up at the faces watching her. She thought of Shaw, who had died carrying a child to safety. She thought of Aaron Price, who had held a line against impossible odds. She thought of Maya Tors, who was alive only because she was too stubborn to die. She thought of Cole, whose last words had been a reminder of who they were. "We did not come to 9 for recognition," she said quietly. "We came because someone needed help. That will never change. Whether you call us young or old, whether you give us seats on your council or not, we will always answer when people are in danger. That is who we are. That is what it means to be human." The ceremony ended an hour later. Maya Tors attended in a borrowed dress uniform, her prosthetic arm still stained with blood. Beside her stood the survivors of the 71st, old men and women who had reminded the galaxy what legends look like when they are not just stories anymore. They were not psionic. They did not regenerate. They had no natural armor or plasma shields. They were simply, terribly, beautifully human. And that had always been enough. On 9, the people built a monument to the soldiers who had saved them. It stood at the entrance to, carved from black stone, showing a group of humans standing against an endless tide of darkness. The inscription at the base was in every language the new, plus one more, English. It read, "We do not fight because we are fearless. We fight because we learned long ago that fear is just another enemy, and we have buried so many." Below that in smaller letters were 3,000 names, old soldiers, gray wolves, legends. People who had refused to let the darkness win.